Hey, everybody. Welcome to the live stream today. It's me, Tim Young, hanging out with you guys on this great, actually kind of rainy, muggy, terrible Monday. What's it like where you are? You're in Austin right now, right?
It's a little misty and a little chilly here
Ugh.
too.
I mean, you're the land commissioner. Can't we do something to fix the weather? Aren't you the climate change commissioner too? Doesn't
I'll talk to God about that.
well, I thought that if we sent Democrats enough money, they could fix the weather. That doesn't. No.
Yeah, I know, right? Somehow that's not working out for them, is it?
No, not at all. By the way, in case you guys are wondering, I'm hanging out today with Texas Land Commissioner Dr. Dawn Buckingham, who I think is one of my favorite guests, and actually, you will be the only guest probably I will ever have on every form of media that I've ever worked.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have to full disclosure. Last time we hung out on local radio here in DFW, you gave me $15, and so I'm basically bought and paid for.
And you're worth every penny, baby.
three crisp fivers, and I am sold, because it was my birthday and I demanded a birthday gift, and I never thought you'd actually give me something, and you opened up your wallet, and everyone was still yelling at me once you left the studio. Why did you keep it? And I said, because
It was a gift.
Why would I be ungrateful?
Right.
And send it back. You've been on a roll as Texas Land Commissioner. I want to talk about all the things you do, but like this, I mean, look at this. This is you're making energy look good here. Like I've never seen. Now, when you show up there, are you wearing like boots, and like are you wearing kind of like the fisherman's boots? Because that does not look like the best place to be wearing a pantsuit, and a bright one.
Well, you're going to laugh. I was actually in heels, and my photographer had me up on this little step ladder to get lined up, and my heels are hanging off one of the rungs. It was a bit of a leg workout, but we made it happen in between gusts of wind. It was kind of funny.
And I mean, you're obviously not just there taking pictures. You're touring the facilities, and you're doing all sorts of real, like, solid work there, like serious stuff. And I mean, did you bring a change of clothes and they have you changed in like a porta potty or something?
I'd been in boots and jeans and no makeup all day, and then we had gone back to shower real quick to take that picture because we knew Shale Magazine was probably on the forefront, and so it's just the gymnastics you do.
I mean, well, I don't do that. Nobody ever wants a photo shoot with me. I'll show the cover of this magazine. I mean, you make land commissioning look good. I don't think, have we ever had an attractive land commissioner before?
Well, I would be the first woman, so I guess it depends on what you find attractive.
It depends. I mean, you could dress like a rhinestone cowboy out there as a man and pull it off.
You could. But that jacket actually is by Double D. It's a Texas designer, I believe, out of Yoakum. So we like to support our Texas designers, and anything with fur on it's usually a good place to start.
That's cool. Any pressure? This is one of those questions you ask if you're a Democrat, but I know you're not, obviously. But any pressure being the first female land commissioner?
No, it's easy.
Did you talk about? Have you ever done shattering the glass ceiling, that kind of stuff? Did you just get to work?
It's a little funny because I was one of the first volunteer firefighters when I was in high school. I went into a male-dominated field in oculoplastic surgery and medicine. I was the first woman to ever represent my Senate district, first Republican from Travis County ever elected to the Texas Senate, and first woman land commissioner. So we just run hard and kick up a little dust and have fun along the way.
You were a firefighter?
I was a volunteer firefighter in high school for a bit.
What? I would have never guessed. I knew you were tough, but like, I don't want to mess with you now. Like, I take back anything negative I've ever said, because I don't want to. So let's talk about all the things that are happening, because I think the major issue right now, obviously, Trump has started deporting people, which, shocking to me, well, not shocking to me, really, is that they knew exactly where all these criminals were when they started rounding them up. I mean, they knew exactly where in every major city these illegal aliens who had committed heinous acts were just hanging out in houses. Does that shock you at all?
It does a little bit. I thought it might have been a little bit more of a needle in a haystack look. But, I just remind everybody, let's just say you're Alexis Nungary, Jocelyn's mom, and you lose one of the people you love most in the world, and you know that person has probably done similar things to other people because they've been detained by police before and then walk out the front door through the sanctuary policies, which is exactly why we want these violent criminals off of our soil. I am so proud of Kristi Noem and Tom Homan and President Trump and his whole group so far. This administration is just going great guns, and it is exciting to be a part of it and to watch it and to help out every way we can.
Can you imagine a scenario where Kamala had won? What would have happened, especially with our border? Because you were able to volunteer 1,400 acres on the border to help out this administration with deportations. But like you literally and our officials from the state here in Texas had to fight to protect our border, and now we don't.
Well, and Texans have been spending billions of tax dollars for a very long time to protect our border. And that's another baton we're looking forward to passing to the Trump administration. And maybe if Congressman Chip Roy and some of the other bills that are percolating through Congress right now, maybe Texas gets reimbursed for some of our expenses in building our own wall.
Yeah, no, I think we should probably get reimbursed, especially legal fees when we had to go fight with the Biden administration to protect. I mean, I just can't believe that the federal government would sue Texas to open up our border rather than secure it. I mean, this is we were living in almost like bizarro world for years.
Yeah, they were subpoenaing me right and left over all kinds of things. I was also the first person to make Texas bigger in a few hundred years by declaring those islands in the Rio Grande, Texas. And when we did that, the International Border Water Boundary whatever agency came after me saying I was causing erosion in Mexico and trying to create all kinds of problems there too. So, the Biden administration was terrible. I'm going to be honest. My worst nightmare was Kamala winning. I do have to say there's something to the perspective of Trump having a 4-year break and seeing how fast and how far the Democrats could go in that short period of time. And I think that's why we're seeing just the crazy fast motion, the forward progress, the delivering on promises out of the gate. I mean, they are really, really moving ahead, and it is so exciting.
Yeah, no. When you see how Joe Biden basically ignored court orders and continued to just push on with things, hey, they made the rules, right? So who are we to deny doing the exact same thing? I think we should. Why
I
not?
almost fell out of my car when Kamala's ad came up that she'd secured the border as the border czar and all that stuff. I was like, lost my mind. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That hypocrisy is just unbelievable.
Hey, when you expand and declare islands in the Rio Grande, a part of Texas, do you get to go out there with a flag and just?
Yes, we did. And then someone came behind us and put a Venezuelan flag. And I'm just going to say that Venezuelan flag didn't fly very long.
What I mean, so you actually have a lot of personal experience as land commissioner when you're overlooking what's happening at the border. Obviously, all the land that Texas has there, and Texas is in control of. Can you just talk a little bit about like what were some of the like you don't have to get too detailed here, but like the worst stuff that you were seeing there because you had to see it.
Well, let's start with that 1,400 acres that we had just offered President Trump this fall. We bought it initially because the Facilities Commission just said, hey, Dawn, we've got this property owner. She won't let law enforcement on her soil. Of course, as soon as the bad guys know they have a safe pass, terrible things happen. It was leading the crime statistics all up and down the border. It's where the original rape trees were found. We made her a fair market value offer, bought that property within 24 hours. We had the right of way for the wall negotiated out. I was also in a big bulldozer bulldozing down those rape trees in honor of all the women and children as a symbolic gesture that this is not going to be tolerated on this property or anywhere else that I have any say over anytime soon. Of course, the wall is completed, minus a few gates and some electric lights and things like that. But that was part of it. The things that we found in the houses along the water on those properties, it was a lot of a lot of things. It was hard to tell what it was, but it was very clear there was all kinds of activity there. But on the islands, what I can tell you we found are IEDs, explosive devices, a lot of illegal weapons, crazy amounts of ammunition, and of course the drugs and the women and the children who were abused, as you would expect. But I tell you what, with the Texas Military Department and DPS, Operation Flat Top, we got those islands cleared. We got the concertina wire up. We've got complete operational control of those islands. So it just shows where there's a will, there's a way where all the agencies can work together we can secure our border, and we did that when Biden was abdicating his constitutional duty to protect our border. And we actually had to cite another part of the Constitution that says that the states have a right to defend themselves if for some reason the federal government can't or won't. And that was a fight right out of the gate is when I got sworn in 2 years ago. So we just unapologetically stand in that gap. We just do everything we can to get complete operational control of our border. And I'm just not going to rest until those violent criminals who are hurting our sons and daughters are off our soil.
Guys, if you're enjoying this conversation, make sure you hit the retweet button. We want to get as many people watching this as possible. As always, hanging out with Dr. Dawn Buckingham, the Texas Land Commissioner. When you find that amount of munitions on those islands, I mean, what were they like preparing a paramilitary force, or is this like cartels that are just loading up just in case they have any kind of pushback when they're trafficking drugs and people over the border? Like, what do you think was happening there?
So before we declared these islands Texas, they were literally law enforcement and military free zones because they belonged to neither Texas nor Mexico. Neither Texas nor Mexican law enforcement or military could step on them. The cartels were actually having pretty much nightly firefights fighting over control of these islands, and so they were just stockpiles. They had built buildings on them. The third island was 171 acres. It's a lot of property. And so they wanted those safe havens. They wanted those safe places to store all of their weapons and guns. And I have a lot of concern over who came across our border the last 4 years. We have hundreds on the terrorist most wanted list just to start. Those are just the ones they saw. I can tell you of the hundreds of thousands of acres that we control along the border, what we were picking up on our game cameras is my estimate is about 20 to 1 of who they were counting. So we have a lot of people to get off of our soil. We look forward to being a part of that. Most people don't even know that the General Land Office built the first section of the wall. One of the things we do is flood mitigation projects all up and down the coast. And of course, the valley floods very badly. So we put in a big levee. It just happened to have a really tall fence on it a couple decades ago. So where there's a will, there's a way. And we'll just continue to be creative and do everything we can because we are literally the tip of the spear, not just protecting our history in oil and gas, but protecting the Texas that we know and love. And I'm happy to do that every day. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll get to at some point here why you went from being a doctor to land commissioner because that's a hell of a responsibility instead of just having a doctor's office. Let's talk about oil and gas here. I know the border is a serious. Oh, look, before we get there, the 1,400 acres is the Trump administration. Are they using it now? Like, what's going on with that 1,400 acres?
So they have reached out. We're starting to have discussions about it. I think they're assessing exactly what they need and exactly where they need it. And of course, every agency in Texas is lined up and ready to help. So we'll see what comes of it. But regardless, whatever comes of it, we're in. We're like, put us in, coach. Whatever we have, you need, however we can be helpful, we're in. So we're excited to be a part of it.
Before I get into this, because I don't have the stat on me and I've got the expert in front of me here, what percentage of American energy comes from Texas?
So about 46% of oil and gas that is produced in the United States comes from Texas. Texas does produce the majority of gas. But, the General Land Office, we steward 13 million acres. We're the largest mineral owner in the state. That money benefits the school children of Texas to a tune of $3.5 billion in my first 2 years of service. And so the General Land Office is responsible for the majority of oil and gas in the state. That's kind of why we step out front and we lead so hard to protect oil and gas. One, energy independence. I cannot emphasize how important that is. But two, with all of the policies, these Green New Deal policies, they were really trying to shut down oil and gas. And so oil and gas needed a lot of defending. We had to get in and fight on all the endangered species. And I love Kim Paxton, the Attorney General. He's awesome. And he gets all the credit for suing the administration, but he needs a plaintiff with standing. And so that was us. And so we're leading with the sagebrush lizard. We're leading on the water mussels. We just got the golden cheek warbler delisted, which of course doesn't affect oil and gas, but it affects a whole lot of other development across the state. We are leading in carbon sequestration, helping our companies get carbon neutral by the 2030s so that they could stay in business. We were countersuing the Biden administration on their liquefied natural gas export moratorium when Biden was was president. So we're just going every way we can, throwing down, defending oil and gas, because right now it is our cleanest energy. Don't even get me started on the windmills and the solar panels and the rare earth minerals they take and the it goes on and on. But yeah, so we're excited to be part of our energy future too. Salt cooled nuclear, the hydrogen technologies, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So it's a lot of fun to be in this office because literally every day, and most people don't know this, we run state veterans programs. We do nursing homes and cemeteries and mortgage programs all over the state. We're the only state that does a mortgage program supported by our state lands. We fund education, like I mentioned, run oil and gas. Of course, the Alamo, I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We do everything coast. We clean up the oil spills. We do habitat restoration. We do beach renourishment. We help Texans recover from disaster. We do all kinds of stuff. So I joke, it appeals to my little elementary ADD self, because one minute we're talking about oil and gas, the next minute we're talking about rebuilding marsh habitat and seagrass. The next minute we're talking about being sure that Alamo is preserved for 500 years to teach our kids our history.
Wow. Yeah. Before we get into what it's like on a day-to-day basis with you, which I always like talking about because I think people forget. I like how ridiculous it is. Not ridiculous, but in a good way. To have the pile of work that you have on your desk every day. It's sort of like being an attorney general with a million cases happening at once. Does your job get easier now, I'd imagine, with Ken Paxton, or have you been working with the Trump administration, Pam Bondi now being the attorney general, or a lot of these DOJ cases and the things where Biden came after you, are they just going to go away?
My hope is yes, because of course everything they were coming at me with was just the complete weaponization of government without any truth left to be told on those accusations that they hurled against me. So we are so excited for so many reasons to have Trump in office. But yeah, we're just in there fighting the good fight. When you stand up, you put on the armor of God and you fight unapologetically for conservative and religious values, the devil comes at you pretty hard. So we're glad that devil got defeated.
Yeah, I can only imagine how much, I mean, it's still not easy, but how much easier your job got now that Trump is in, and you may not have to fight as many fights as you've had to do against our own federal government to protect our state and create energy. One of the things that I always warn people about is just because we've won nationally doesn't mean that there aren't local things that we have to pay attention to. I think when we change the climate in our, and not using that term appropriately here, but when we change the way that the political climate and how we are winning, we got to do it on a state level and a local level. I remember very early on, I think it might have been the first interview I had with you. You were up against this El Paso City Council with a climate charter where they were trying to limit the production of oil and gas in Texas and move forward with these crazy climate and Green New Deal policies from a city level. I don't think a lot of people think that happens, or they don't pay attention to it because they're so focused on, and the news basically covers all the big things. And these little cities and these little liberal city councils can push this stuff through, right?
They can. We won that vote. We killed that charter. Charter went down with 85% of the population against it. And we just tried to bring the argument that you are essentially defunding public education in the state because, of all the money that oil and gas generates for public education. But you are exactly right. You can't just win a national election. You have to win the hearts and the minds of the people. And what we're seeing now is basically sort of scare tactics and terror tactics on the left. We had a superintendent down in the valley who put out a letter to all the parents that was claiming that ICE was going to be boarding school buses, yanking kids off as they went to their assorted extra academic activities, sports, UIL competitions, and that parents should really consider whether or not they wanted to let their children out of the house. This, of course, is across the board false.
Yeah.
Those are the tactics that we're seeing. So we have to continue. I always joke, I grew up in a denomination that we sat in the same pew, we sat in the same seat in the same pew every day. And when you're passing the peace, maybe you said hi to somebody, but in general, you just looked straight ahead and you were really quiet. Now we go to a Bible-based evangelical church and it's, Jesus all day long, right? Proclaiming to the world. So I encourage all the conservatives out there, you got to walk into the non-traditional Republican communities. You have to go and be present and be unafraid and show them that conservative values are really what's bringing the resources to these communities, and how the liberal values are continue to hurt those communities and basically hold them down in servitude. So we just do that every day. We step into non-traditional communities. We represent conservative values. We talk about how we're bringing the resources, and we go in unafraid. And some days that works out great, and some days it's a little rough. But if you don't walk into the communities, you don't talk to people, you don't put things in terms that speak to them and their goals, because really everybody wants a safe place for their kids to grow up. Everybody wants prosperity to share with their family. And when you speak those values and you come and you represent, you win the hearts and minds. And that's how we're going to continue to keep not just our state, but the country on the right track.
Yeah, and it's that communication that has to be open and consistent here, because one of the hardest things to communicate is that good things take time, and change takes time. And I think Democrats understand how to counteract that at the moment. Like you said, when they're spreading the lies that ICE is going to be pulling kids off of buses. The same thing happened when we're 4 days into the Trump presidency, and the left is saying, "Why haven't egg prices gone down?" And it's like, wait a second. This stuff. But the problem is that for everyday people who may or may not understand the system and processes and things like that, they may fall for it. And the only way that we win that is with communication with our neighbors and our friends, and going into those communities, like you said. Like why aren't gas prices lower yet? Well, we have to open up refineries and actually like unleash American production. And so there's so much that has to happen for things to come down, and it may take over a year in some cases. I know at least the border encounters are down pretty quickly. That's the quick one that we can talk about, right?
Yeah, the border encounters are down. We're seeing inflation coming down. That's a big one. If you're
Yeah.
trying to buy a house, we're seeing really everything in business kind of quicken back up. I think our country was paralyzed by fear. Obviously, fear that Kamala was going to be elected. Trump had one heck of an election night. We saw counties in Texas that have been voting Democrat for 150 years flip, and for the first time vote majority Republican. And so we have to continue to be in those counties. We have to continue to be in those communities. Like you said, we have to speak your truth. That's why I so appreciate you. That's everything you do, because without folks like you getting out there and speaking the truth and the word and doing it in a kind tone, when you walk up and you smack somebody in the
I'm not
face.
kind. Yeah, I actually, I'm the according to AI, I am a violent, hateful person apparently. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I just love you. So I think you're perfect. But, when you walk up and you smack somebody in the face, they're not very inclined to listen to you. But you walk in and you speak in a kind tone. God calls us to love our neighbor. So let's love everybody into understanding and truth and context. And honestly, I think conservative values win all day long. And so we're just going to keep talking the talk and walking the walk, and hopefully people follow.
I think they will, and I think they did last time. I mean, this last election, we saw a huge shift in there was really a red wave in many districts. Let's talk about your daily routine. By the way, after the compliment you threw me, I don't even. We're done here. We're good. Good to go. Thanks. Let's talk about all the things you do, because I mean, you mentioned again, you've got energy, you've got all of the land, you've got all of the the agricultural things that go along with that.
Mhm.
You've got Veterans Affairs stuff. You've got landmarks like the Alamo.
Mhm.
What is a day like for the Texas Land Commissioner? Again, one of the largest states. You've got so much land to cover. You've got so much publicly owned land, state-run land to cover. That's not an easy job.
Well, I love my job. I think it's great. I think it's honestly the best job in Texas. It's a lot like being a doctor, ironically. And it was funny, and I'm sure we may talk about this at some point. But when I decided to run for office, I realized that as a physician, I could help one person at a time in my office. But as an elected official, I could potentially help millions of Texans at the same time. And I felt like we needed that help in some sense. I believe Texas leads our nation, which of course our nation leads the world. So my personal opinion is Texas leads the world, and we need strong leaders, really servant-minded leaders with a true heart and core about what Texas is, what we should be, and how to keep it the Texas that we know and love. But, I wake up most mornings at 4:30. The majority of nights I sleep away from my house. There were some periods of 6 weeks where I slept in my own bed about 5 nights, because there is a lot of ground to cover, and there are a lot of people to talk to, and there's a lot of different things we do. We have offices all over the state. We have property all over the state. I'm trying to visit all of our properties to understand better what they are. I had a lot to learn about oil and gas. I still have a lot to learn about oil and gas as we unapologetically defend that industry every day. But I will tell you, I think the single most important thing I'm doing is getting the Alamo right. and being sure that it stays right and that that building is standing in 500 years so that we can teach our kids our loud and proud, line in the sand, liberty or death history, and let them be proud Texans. So we're growing up the next generation of leaders. But it's fun. I mean, but you're right. So someday we're talking timber because, of course, we have timberlands in East Texas. Some days I'm chairing the Permanent University Fund Board for Lease that benefits UT and A&M. Some days we're talking about leasing in Parks and Wildlife because I chair their board for lease as well. Some days we're talking about where to put a new veterans cemetery to provide an amazing place for eternal rest as respect of our veterans because we're very clear on the fact that we are the land of the free because of the brave. Sometimes I'm down picking up trash off the beaches. Sometimes I'm hugging people and consoling them when they've lost everything they have in a disaster, and we're in there to help them rebuild. Sometimes I'm handing somebody new keys to a new house that they never thought would happen. And so it's just amazing. But yes, we are literally in every corner of the state. When I ran, my Senate district was Bandera to Temple to Abilene, 20,000 square miles of the heart of Texas. It was bigger than 8 states in geographic area and 9 states in population. And I'm going to be honest, when I ran statewide, I thought, I've essentially run a statewide race in 17 states. How hard can this be? And everyone's like, Texas is really big, but wow, Texas is really, really big. You just don't even realize until you're really crisscrossing in every corner. But I love every square inch of this state. I love being in all the different communities. I'm a rural girl by heart. That's kind of mostly how I grew up. And so I just love getting out in the communities and I get to meet so many amazing people doing amazing things. So I love what I do. My husband gets a little burned out on me being gone so much every once in a while. So we have to be sure to keep him happy. We've been married 33 years at this point, but it's really, I just find it a joy.
It's incredible because before this live stream happened, I told you what I think about members of Congress not being afraid of people. I wouldn't expect them to know that much about their own districts. In fact, I pretty soon here I'll be doing a little show where I go on the road with an organization. I can't announce it yet, but I'm going to be going to people's districts and hanging out with them and having them show me around their districts, which I'd love to do with you at some point here. But I mean, your district, this is a hard job, and I say all that to say this is that your knowledge and your work and the breadth of just your travel every day and where you need to be and what you need to represent. Obviously, you're an intelligent person. You're an incredibly intelligent person. But when you go into the office, you have to have a hell of a team that is like, all right, get in the car. You got to go to this. Here's your file for because you're the one making the decisions on top of this. But I personally, I'm going to an arcade after this. Literally, I'm going to play some claw machines down at the mall after this, and I have to schedule that out for myself with you. I can't imagine what your day is like because it's got to be nonstop, and you have to have probably the tip-top staff, other than that, Kimmy, handing you files constantly, and just saying you're working on the road all the time. And do you even know half the time? I obviously the land, where you are when you're there, but do you know where you're going most days, or do you just entrust it to your staff?
I'm going to be honest. There are periods of time where if I haven't packed for it, I don't know where I'm going next because I haven't looked that far ahead because we have 5 speaking engagements and 3 media events in a single day, and we're covering hundreds of miles. But I have an amazing team. I push them really, really hard. I'm a surgeon by nature, right? I get up early, I stay up late. I'm dedicated to being a lifelong learner. I believe you're supposed to serve the people you're supposed to serve, and you're supposed to do it well. And you don't quit until you get it right. And so I am blessed with an amazing team. They work really, really hard. And yes, we have a parade of educational binders. It's like always the binders and getting them right and getting the talking points correct and getting them updated and learning about new things and figuring out we don't get it quite right, how to get it right. And but I am blessed with the team. I would say I can only be as good as my team is, and my team makes me look better than I am every day because they're so amazing. And so it's been really wonderful to come in. It was interesting running for this position because I have 800 employees. I'm going to be honest. When I decided to run for this position, maybe a lot of people had negative thoughts about the general land office. In fact, I had one person tell me the other day that They thought the General Land Office was where Republicans went to kill their political career. I was like, well, thank you. They don't feel that way anymore, but yeah, it was kind of funny. But coming in and identifying the problems and realizing that the General Land Office was actually doing a really great job. They just weren't sharing it, what they were doing with the world. And so that's really what we shifted. We shifted our communications. We had some things to fix, of course, but we fixed them fast and really with most of the executive team in place. We've done leadership training, we've done all kinds of things because I'm like, this is how we get in line, this is how we serve others. We try to get to a yes, we try to be customer service oriented. And if we can't get to a yes for various reasons, we try to be honest about that. But then we come back and we say, what were you trying to fix? And maybe we can help you with something else. And so I think that's been a major shift in the industry. We've received a lot of good feedback. Actually, before, we're now in the legislative session. And before things get too crazy in the legislative session, I tried to step foot in every one of the 181 legislators' offices. Because let's be honest, we all have the same constituents. I have the whole state. They have a part of the state. Whether their constituents voted for me or not, they want to see us working together. And so we come in, we meet everybody, we see how we can help them. The Texas Senate actually votes bipartisan 98% of the time. So the vast majority of the time, you've got people from different political views agreeing and working towards a common goal. So we try and go and make those relationships. And that way, when people need something or we need something, we have the relationships to go in there and get it done. If there's a problem, if there's a hiccup, then again, we can come together and say, hey, how do we hammer this out? Because when politicians start shooting at each other, it's the people they're supposed to serve that miss out. It's the people that are 7 years after Hurricane Harvey that still have a tarp on their roof because politicians were fighting, as opposed to now that we've come together, we're getting those people in their new houses. And so it's a game changer.
Your job sounds exhausting, and just you talking about it to me, I'm exhausted. Personally, we're talking to Dr. Dawn Buckingham. She's the land commissioner of the great state of Texas. How did God, every time I talk to you, I come up with other things to talk about here, and then I want to get to you personally. But how could the Texas Land Commissioner 50 years ago efficiently do their job as opposed to now? I mean, I know that I'm sure they were great, whoever they were. I'm not a follower of whoever was Texas Land Commissioner, but I can only imagine 50 years ago without the technology, without the ability to travel at the rate that we do now.
Mhm.
I mean, even 30 years ago, it had to be such an incredibly, much more incredibly difficult job than it is now, and it sounds like a difficult job now. How did they function? I mean, obviously we did okay, but I'd imagine our land commissioners weren't seeing most of the state.
Well, I think you're right. If they were doing it, relatively slowly, where they were gone weeks at a time in a car. But yeah, it's great to be able to be mobile. We have drones. If I can't get to something personally, then my team can shoot drone footage of it and give us an idea. But the technology is a huge help. It's a huge help in oil and gas. It's a huge help in processing all of our veterans' mortgages. I mean, you're right. I can't imagine how they did it 30 and 50 years ago. So I'm glad I'm land commissioner today because it does make it easier for sure.
So when are you going to write a book? Because
I'm looking for a ghostwriter. So
well,
people emailing me and apply.
well, yeah, I mean, because I'm now getting through the audio version of Hillbilly Elegy, and I'm not saying you're a hillbilly, by the way.
I read the book. It's a good book.
And the movie, like, I don't know if you saw the movie, I just cried.
Mhm.
But how do you go from a firefighter in high school to a doctor, then a doctor to, I mean, again, I don't get it. Like, because you knew what you were running for. And I know now, having interviewed you and hung out with you enough time, I know that you knew what you were in for when you became land commissioner. You were like, hey, give me this responsibility. See, that's why I think you're nuts. Because if I run for office, I'm going to run for something that's going to be like, relatively local, hint, hint. But I know, because I'm good with like a little area with few things, but you're again, highly intelligent person. You're taking a look at this position and you're like, oh my God, like there's no way that you don't look at that as a human being and go, this is a lot. So I kind of want you to go through like how the hell you got from firefighter in high school to medical doctor, and then medical doctor all the way up to like looking at this pile of work, because you knew what you were up against and what you were taking on responsibly, and you haven't aged. So I don't know what.
Well, my husband's a facial plastic surgeon. He teases
Oh,
me I married my fountain of youth. So
well, there you and Pam
Buckingham Center
Bondi.
for Facial Plastic Surgery, by the way, I'm 70. No, I'm just teasing.
Well, you and Pam Bondi are like two people who, like, I look at some of these other members of Congress and I'm like, oh, and elected officials. I'm like, you've been through it. Maybe lay off the sauce. Because that'll I try to pickle myself and I stop once in a while, But now tell us that story because I think it's incredible.
So, if you really want to know the core of who I am, I'm just kind of that ADD hyperactive kid with a issue with authority over me. It's kind of my fundamental wiring, and I believe in really helping others. So I was always the one um, sticking up for kids that were bullied in the schoolyard as a child. Always wanted to help, always wanted to heal, and always wanted to be a doctor. My dad was a doctor, really from the time I was about 5. I'd get up at 3 in the morning. I'd go around with him, sometimes actually be in the operating room with him. And then those were the days that the pagers went one way. It was Doctor 210, come to the emergency room now. And it didn't matter where we were eating, what we were doing. The whole family picked up because you were always only in one car. And we would spend hours, hours and hours and hours in the doctor's lounge waiting for my dad to piece together whoever had, wrecked their motorcycle or car or whatever for the day. And I got spending so much time in a hospital, I became acutely aware that there's a difference between providers. And you don't know that unless you're kind of on the inside. So I always wanted to be a doctor for a lot of reasons. One, I love to heal people. When I'm a lifelong learner, I believe in making a difference. But it was really part of it was just being able to take care of my family and knowing who the really, really good doctors were growing up. And so then when I became a physician and I finished my training, I became of the strong opinion that between government and insurance companies, they have pretty much messed up healthcare. So I became an advocate on what I consider patient-centered healthcare, which is basically, and you've probably experienced it. Your doctor says, "Hey, you need this medicine." And then you go to get that medicine and the insurance company says, no, you can't have that medicine. You have to have this other medicine. By the way, that other medicine didn't even work. You've tried it, but you have to try it again to make the insurance company happy. That kind of stuff drove me crazy. Obamacare comes down the pike. I actually am one of the most outspoken national critics of Obamacare. Bloomberg News sends this guy down, this reporter down to Texas to see who's this blonde chick and how is she kicking up so much dust against Obamacare. Because at the time, I was chair of the Young Physicians section for the American Medical Association. And right after that article, and I'd always kind of thought about running for office, but right after that article, I magically, I'm sure completely unrelated, started being audited. And so once I survived 4 audits, I was like, oh, baby, you just put me in politics. Watch it. Let's go. So I ran for school board. Governor Perry actually appointed me to the State Board of Educators certification. The educators on that board elected me their vice chair. Dewhurst put me on the Sunset Commission, which is a group of 12 people, 5 state reps, 5 senators, a public member on each side. And we look at every agency on a rotating basis and say, should that agency exist? Yes or no? And if yes, how do we make it better? And if no, how do we get rid of it? Which is my core belief in government. I'm a small government kind of girl. And then my Senate district came open and I came through an 8-way dogfight that I thought was a dogfight until we got into the runoff. And then that was a bloodbath. And of course, won the runoff and no Democrat was going to win my seat. Loved being in the Senate. And it just kept going from there. But it was really just, I've got to get in there and fight the good fight, unafraid and unapologetic, because our kids, I am very worried about, as much as I love Texas, as much as I love our country, I'm very worried about what they're inheriting if we don't really stand up and start dialing back some of the things that have happened in the last few decades. And so I'm in there fighting for our kids. I'm fighting for the Texas I know and love, and I'm not going to stop until we've won.
I think it's really important that you mentioned in the middle of your story that you ran for school board because a lot of people, again, a lot of parents finally woke up because of all the trans stuff and all of the just the girls getting beat up in school and having to share bathrooms and stuff. But you were ahead of the game on that. Like that's how you really change your community. If you're worried, and if you're worried about things nationally, you got to start locally. It's so
Mhm.
important.
You're exactly right. I tease I ran for school board before it was cool. My superintendent's happiest day was when I decided to run for the Senate and I stepped down from the school board because I didn't want to bring that fight into the school board room. But yes, it was very evident once I got onto the school board that we had real issues. I'm the product of public education, as are my children. But our public schools have some real issues, and we need to be honest and address it. And the teacher unions are a big part of that problem.
I just think that any position you have now after land commissioner, whatever you decide to do in life, is going to be so much more relaxing. just like so chill. Like even if you became like governor or something eventually, I feel like it's a more chill position than land commissioner, because you as governor you have more executive departments beneath you that people can run around and do things. But you've really taken on everything on your own here, and it shows. And it's because of that. It's clear when you piece your story together. It's because you did it all on your own when you started with school board. When you're like getting your hands dirty at that level, you know what it takes to actually be successful at a position and make and enact change.
Well, I actually vacation like this too. The only time I sit still is when I hunt or tube down a river. The rest of the time is just full steam ahead. I can't help it. So it's kind of an intensity I bring to everything I do. But it's fun. I do love it.
Yeah, no, it sounds. I mean, obviously you do, and that's why I wanted to make sure I brought you on here, because you're one of my favorite people, I think, in politics, just in general.
Oh,
It doesn't feel like I'm talking to a politician. I'm glad I wasn't there when you were fighting for other stuff, man. That's and the fact that very early on they knew that you'd be good to judge whether or not an agency would is worth continuing on and or should be cut is that's an honor. Like to be able to cut the budget, man. That's like the top job you could have as a conservative.
Making government smaller is a very difficult thing. It sounds easy when you speak it, but the walk is tough. But
Yeah.
we'll make it as small as we can because, there's mission drift as human beings, right? So we all start out doing one thing. We all want our ant hill bigger. We end up doing something completely different. Agencies aren't any different than that. And that's how government grows.
Yeah. All right. Our co-boss here, Kimmy, is telling me that you have a hard out in 5 minutes. So let's talk about some fun stuff here. The Alamo, not only is it educational, it's just cool to go visit. And San Antonio in particular, it's a great little area where the Alamo is. I can't speak for the rest of San Antonio, but where the Alamo is fantastic. How important is that to that you are tasked with protecting history on top of everything else?
Single most important thing I'm doing. The single thing that I will throw down unlike anything else, because it's so important to get it right. And the revisionist left that wants to take our history away from what it is and undermine who we are. And if you look at all the communist revolutions in the past, that's exactly how they did it. They debase you from your history and who you are. So to me, it's the linchpin that keeps Texas, Texas. And just to run you through our $550 million project, because really what we're doing for the first time, we are making a visit to the Alamo worthy of the significance of the events that happened there. Because let's be honest, we took our friends to the Shrine of Texas Liberty, known around the world. Doesn't matter where in the world we travel, we say we're Texans. Doesn't matter where in the world I've been, I get the answer back, remember the Alamo, because it is literally around the world known as the symbol of giving up your life for your values, for your friends, for your country at that time. And yet, when we brought our friends, you stood on a busy corner. You had the lovely wax museum to your right. You can't make it up.
I know.
Your friends, you've built up the Alamo. It's such a big deal. And your friends literally looked at you and said, "Is that it?" And you spent about 7 minutes and you went to do something else in San Antonio. So now what we have is we have a collection center because, of course, Phil Collins, the British singer, had a special connection to the Alamo, amassed a great collection. So now we have his collection on display that he bequeathed to us. We are, for the first time, building an education center. We're going to have early childhood curriculum all the way through high school in a designated area where the kids can immerse and learn. We're going to have a 100,000 square foot museum that, of course, is battle centric, but it sets the battle in the context of time from the early Native Americans who lived here all the way through how the Alamo continues to affect pop culture. In the middle of that's going to be a 4D theater. You are going to sit in your seat behind a defender. You're going to feel those cannonballs hit. You're going to smell that gun smoke. You're going to hear the sounds. You're going to see the visual. It's going to be amazing. And then we get to the church. And that's honestly, and this is kind of, and we'll do a whole thing on this at some point because we've got a lot going on there. But the church has some real structural integrity issues. So the church, of course, is what we call the Alamo. It's the church in the fort. The limestone walls have been wicking salt water up out of the ground. And if you've seen limestone around a saltwater pool, it doesn't end well. It melts. So we've got some walls that are not quite structurally sound, and we've got a roof that's lived beyond its structural life and is causing active damage to the building. So that roof needs to come off. We need a new one. It's going to look very similar. So the look of the Alamo won't change. But in that meantime, we're going to have to build a protective structure over it, because can you imagine we pull the roof off and a big hailstorm hits or a big rain bomb hits and it's desecrated? So we can't let that happen. So people are going to probably lose their minds when we build a protective structure over the Alamo. We're going to do our best to keep that western facade, the parapet that everybody is so recognizable. We're going to keep that open as best we can for pictures and allow access whenever we can. But it's going to take about 18 months. The other thing that happened when they put on that roof is steel was not galvanized in those days, and so they drove steel rods down into the wall. So we're going to have to selectively deconstruct some of that to get all of that out there, because that's contributing to the salts that are dissolving the limestone. That's going to be a big deal. But you know what? We're going to get it done, and we're going to get it done right. And that building is going to stand for 500 years, and it's going to be there to tell our kids and our grandkids and our great, 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 great grandkids our history, so that they can pick up the torch when we pass it to them and defend the Texas we know and love and keep us the same.
Dr. Dawn Buckingham, I know we got a hard out right now. That was really well timed, by the way. You're getting good at media with because I know that's a hell of a lot of detail that you could have got into there, and we knocked it out perfectly. I can't wait to be there and visit this and see that 4D theater is going to be incredible. The whole thing is just like, I'm just glad you're in this position, because I couldn't imagine anybody else that I know in politics or in any business that could handle the position like you do. Dr. Dawn Buckingham, Texas Land Commissioner, thanks for joining us today. And yeah, good luck with, I'm sure you've got 85 meetings after this, and you're going to be running to the far corners of our state.
Well, God bless you. I appreciate what you do, and I'll look forward to talking to you again soon.